Hello there and welcome back to my channel, where today's video is probably the first time that I am actually on trend with something, because I purchased the Love Notes palette from Beauty Bay. It was their 2022 Valentine's Day release, and I'm actually filming this on Valentine's Day. This palette is all sorts of lavenders and pinks. It's a very light toned palette with a couple of deepening shades, and I think it's going to be a beautiful companion for the Age of Opulence palette, which I also own. So today's video is going to be all about swatching, and I'll do two different tutorials, this being one of them, and then at the end of the video I will give my final thoughts on how this palette performs and how it compares to the other Beauty Bay palettes. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Rachel. I am a homeschooling stay-at-home mom who loves to play with colorful eyeshadow. I don't actually know that much about other kinds of makeup. It's just all about the eyes for me. I love to play with it. So if you're interested in that sort of thing and you'd like to see eyeshadow related videos and colorful content on your timeline, I hope you'll consider liking and subscribing. I do try to upload about 3 videos a week, and you can also find me on Instagram at Shimmers and Silver. Now without further ado, let's dive in. Okay, so here's the palette itself. It has this beautiful filigree bordering detail on all 4 corners and also around the word itself. The name of the palette, obviously Love Notes, and it's embossed. It's sort of a raised and textured print right here, and then it's got these little bubble details. The whole thing is very cool toned, and I like it. I think it's pretty. Now let's open this beautiful thing up, and here we go. The Love Notes palette by Beauty Bay. It's a lot lighter toned than both of my other Beauty Bay palettes. I own Wilderness and Age of Opulence, and this is obviously a much lighter tone. However, I think that this palette would work really well with Age of Opulence. I'm actually quite excited to try them together. Let's get into the swatches. Okay, so my arm is totally clean. It does not have any primer or anything on it. It's just been cleaned with soap, and let's get into it. This is the shade Corset. Sorry if you hear my baby in the background. She's getting a little sleepy, but it's too early for bedtime. Here's the shade Corset, a beautiful... She's also bouncing in her bouncer. This shade Corset is a beautiful mid-toned peachy sort of brown. Next we'll go into the shade Cotton. And that's right here. Cotton is basically a lighter version of my skin tone. It's quite light. It would be a really nice blending out shade. Next we have a shimmer shade. This is called Chandelier, and it's a lovely champagne-y pink sort of shimmer. It's definitely got some pink to it. The next shade we have is called Angel. This is a very light pink matte. This one is kind of like, it's kind of like a very, very light pastel version of a Barbie or bubblegum pink. It's really light, but it's got a nice tone to it, and it definitely has a slightly purple leaning undertone. And then here is the shade Cheers. Oh, that's lovely. Cheers is a beautiful matte dusty rose color. Very pretty. That one's really pretty. Starting the next row, we're getting the shade Mahogany. Mahogany is a beautiful, deeper brownish, but it's got like a pink lean to it as well. And then a shimmer shade called Candlestick. Oh, look at that. Candlestick is a nice brownish shimmer, but it has like an orange pink reflect to it. Here is this shade Soap, S-O-A-P. This is a very light lilac-y kind of color. I really don't know how these are gonna look on camera. I'm hoping you're able to see a pretty good distinction between the colors. And this is now the shade Bellini. Oh, that's so pretty. Bellini is a beautiful peach shimmer. Now this is the shade Flush. And this is a very light pink matte, but it's darker than this light pink matte over here, which was called Angel. This Flush is more of a bubblegum pink. Kind of like Double Bubble, you know, the actual chewing gum, Double Bubble, that's more of that color pink. Moving on, we have this shimmer called Pillow. It swatches like a dream. Pillow is more of a pinky, purpley, rose gold color. It's very pretty. Then we have another light purple matte. This one is called Lavender. This is still a mid-toned lavender, but it definitely has blue undertones. It's very pretty. It's more of a periwinkle, like the 2022's Color of the Year periwinkle. This would be a good match for that shade family. And now we have the shimmer called Princess. And Princess is a beautiful, light, lilac-y lavender shimmer. It's got blue shift to it as well. It's really pretty. The next shade is called Handkerchief, and it's a yet brighter version of pink. It's more of a Barbie pink. It's actually quite pretty. I like that. Nice matte shade. And then we have the color Cupid, which is a shimmer. Oh, look at that. Beautiful rosy red shimmer. Very nice. This one seems to be not as reflective as the other shimmers. It's still really pretty. It's just not as reflective. So those are the first 3 rows. Okay, to finish off the palette, we're gonna start the last row with the shade Lilac. Lilac is again a purple matte, also with blue undertones and very, very pretty. And then here is the shade Spark. This is another shimmer. This one is very much a combination of a pinky purple shimmer. It's quite nice. Now we've got the shade Glove. I suspect that we'll have some patchiness issues with this shade because you can see the way it's swatched. I'm guessing it's going to need to be built up in a very intentional manner. It is a beautiful deep plum color, but with this sort of pigment sometimes gets a little patchy, so I'm curious to see how that one's going to work. The penultimate shade in this palette is called Confetti. This is a pinkish red sort of shimmer, a little more on the warm pink side. It's quite nice. And then finally we have the shade Ruby. Ruby is deeply pigmented, reddish garnet sort of shade, but it has purple undertones. And if it works well, it would be a very nice deepening out shade for all of the colors in this palette. So there you have it. You can see my swatches got a little bit better as we went on. They started out quite thin over here, but I think it's very pretty. Getting started with look number 1, I've already primed my eyes using the Glamlight Icing Primer in the shade White Frosting. And now I'm taking a medium-sized blending brush and I'm dipping into the shade Flush, which is a light pink matte. I'm not going to hold the palette up to my face during this video because it screws up my lighting, but I'll show you in the editing process what shades I'm using. But anyway, I'm going to put Flush in my crease. I've decided to do a halo eye, so Flush is just going to be a transition color from the halo eye into my skin tone. And I want to start off today using the shade, well, not start, but I definitely want to use the shade Glove because when I swatched that one, it was a little patchy looking, and I'm just curious to see how it will behave on the eye. I also did watch a couple of other videos using this palette, and some people were saying that the shade Glove is patchy, so I'm curious to see how it behaves. Maybe it's technique, maybe it's foundation problems or primers or whatever. You know, people do different things. First, we're starting with this shadow Flush and just blending it all through the crease and up towards the brow bone. I'm going to take a small blending brush and dive right into that shade of Uncertainty called Glove. It is the darkest purple matte in this palette, and I'm going to put it starting in my outer corner and create the shape that I like. And then I'll also move to the inner corner and do the same. Remember, this is a halo eye, so I'm only putting it in the very extreme corners. I've noticed with Beauty Bay shadows, all of their palettes, like across the board, generally they don't build super well, so it's usually a good idea to start with the darkest shade and then work lighter from there, which is honestly the opposite of what I usually do, where I start with, you know, lighter shades and build from there. But, you know, it's alright if I have to change my technique a little bit because of a formula. I mean, these companies all have different formulas, so you have to figure out what works for each one. And if that was the reason that people are having patchiness, because they were trying to build darker shades on top of the lighter shades, Well, that makes sense, because Beauty Bay isn't always the best formula for that specific technique. I'm going to take my original blending brush and soften out, just buff out these edges a bit. You may notice that I'm working in an outward and upward angle. Like, I'm not doing the colors straight up and down. I'm working them this direction. Okay, now that color's laid down pretty well. I will say I do notice a little bit of patchiness when I laid it on top of the flush pink shadow that we put down first. So it's pretty consistent with my experience of Beauty Bay formula, where the darkest shadows don't really like to sit on top of lighter tones. So you should start with the darkest and work your way out from there. I am taking a smaller brush. It's a little bit pinched and it's relatively dense. It's more dense than my regular blending brush. And I'm going to dip into the shade Lavender, which is a really pretty blue-toned purple. And I'm going to use this on the edges of what I just laid down to just blend it out a little bit and add some color contrast. At this point, I want to take a smudger brush and dip back into the shade Glove and run that down my lower outer lash line. And meet up with the outer corner here. Now I'd like to place down some shimmer. I'm going to take a flat shader brush and dip it first into the shade Princess, which is the lighter of the two purple shimmers. I'm going to dip into the palette and then spray my brush. I'm going to place this on the center area between all the matte colors. And then on top of that shade, I'm going to place the color Pillow, which is to the left of that one. This is a lighter shimmer, but it's more of a purple-pink combo. It's not really a purple shimmer. I'm spraying that one as well and placing that right in the center of the lid. I'd like to bring some pink onto the lower lash line, so I'm taking a smudger brush and I'm going to dip into the shade Handkerchief, and I'm going to fill the rest of the lower lash line from the inner corner out to meet that glove shadow that we put there first. Now I'm going to take a small pencil brush and dip into the shade Bellini, which is a shimmery peachy color. I'm then going to spray that and place that on my inner corner and drag it down to the lower lash line. And finally, because I am a sucker for blue and purple, I'm taking the shade Big Splash from ColourPop. This is an eyeliner, and I'm going to line my waterline. Okay, that's it for shadows. I'm going to go off camera and use some black eyeliner and mascara, and then I'll be back to show you the finished look one. Alright, here is the finished look. I think it turned out very pretty. As far as the formula goes, so far it seems like every other Beauty Bay formula that I have tried. So here's look one, and stay tuned for look number 2. For today's look, I'm going to move a little bit more quickly and talk less because I don't want this video to be a million hours long. I'm going to take a medium blending brush. It's a little bit denser than a really full blending brush, and I'm going to take my own advice and dip into the shade Ruby, which is the dark red matte. I'm going to start with the darkest and blend out into the lightest and see how that works with this formula. So I'm placing Ruby right here in my outer corner, and I'm not going to bring it up too high because I'm going to blend it out with some other colors. If I were working from light to dark, then this would be my deepening shade and I would just put it in the outer corner. I know this looks a little crazy right now. I'm just trusting the process and taking my own advice. I'm going to take a smaller, about the same amount of denseness, but it's much smaller and it's pinched, little blending brush. I'm going to dip into the shade Cheeks, which when I did my swatching for this video, I actually misread it and I had written that it was called Cheers. It's not, it's called Cheeks with a K. So I'm going to dip into Cheeks and I'm going to blend out this color a little bit just on the edges. Again, we're working dark to light, so usually I would place down a transition color and then deepen and deepen and deepen. Well, this time I started deepest actually, and now I'm placing down incremental transition colors. So Cheeks is gonna go right here, soften the edges of Ruby. Now I want to try one of these really, really light tone shades, so I'm taking a much fluffier and larger blending brush, and I'm going to dip into the shade Angel, which is the lightest of the pink mattes. And I'm going to start this in my inner corner and just buff out all of these other shadows. And then when I get to that darker outer area with the shade Angel, I'm actually going on top of the ruby shadows and just going in circular motions out, like upward and out this way, to kind of work the shades together a bit. Okay, it's time for some shimmer now. I'm going to take a flat C or shader brush, and I want to dip into the shade Bellini. So I'm going to dip into the shadow first, and then I will spray the brush, because that is a really good way to control fallout. I want Bellini on the inner corner, so I'm going to place it here and then go about, not all the way to the matte shades, because I'm going to put one more shimmer, a darker shimmer down there. So Bellini is going to start here and go almost to the mattes in the outer corner. I would like to play with the shade Cupid. It's that beautiful reddy shimmer, red gold shimmer. So I'm dipping into that with the same flat brush, and then, like I do with all of my shimmers, I will spray it. And now this is going to transition into the mattes. So I'm placing it right here, like between the shimmer and the mattes. I just think it's such a pretty shimmer. I wanted to use it today. Then I'll dip back into Bellini with the other side of the brush and help blend those two shadows together. I think if this Cupid color were paired with the more brown tones of the palette, it would come off as a little bit more red. But when it's paired with these pinky tones, it definitely pulls a little more purple. Either way, it's very pretty. Now for the lower lash line, I'm grabbing a smudger brush. I'm going to dip into Cheeks first and lay that on my lower lash line, like the whole length of it, I think. And now, simply out of curiosity, I want to try the Mahogany shade, because I've seen some reviews where all three of the deepening shadows, people were saying they didn't work great and they were patchy, so I want to try Mahogany. I'm not going to get a great idea of it because I'm not laying it into a large area, but I want to try it anyway. I'm taking the smudger brush, dipping into Mahogany, and I'm going to place this on top of a shadow in the lower outer lash line. I'm not going to get a good idea of how it performs because it's such a small area, but I kind of want to try and see how it looks. I think it looks nice. I'm now taking a small blending brush and I'm going to dip into the shade Chandelier, which is the center shimmer shade on the top row. I have sprayed my brush and I'm now going to place that on my inner corner as a highlight shade and then drag it down a little bit onto the lower lash line. I'm going to finish off the look by adding a waterline color. This is the shade Boots from ColourPop, and it's just a kind of a hot pink liner. Okay, now I'm going to go off camera and do some black eyeliner and mascara, and I'll be back to show you the final look. Okay guys, here's the finished look number 2. I think it's very pretty. I'm loving the almost purple, almost red, almost pink sort of feel of it. It's not just full-on monochromatic, and I think it's really pretty. So let me give you some thoughts regarding this palette. I'm going to hold it up, and I apologize if the lighting gets messed up a little bit, but these are my thoughts about this palette. First off, when I look at this, I see 4 color stories. I was tempted to do 4 looks in one video, but honestly, I have enough trouble with my older phone and how it processes just one look, so I didn't put myself through that. But I see a gold-brown color story. Over here, we've got light pinks and peaches. Here we've got the purples, obviously, and then over here we have pinky reds. And so the nice thing is that each of these colors works well together. Like this shimmer would look really beautiful with the pinks or the reds, and then this shimmer would look really beautiful with the purples, and they just, I mean, today I did more of the pinky tones, but then I grabbed these 2 reds and then I paired it with this shimmer, which is more of a peach, and they all work together in a really pretty way. I also like how they've laid out the shimmers in a very reasonable, well thought out way. You've got shimmer, 2 shimmers here, you've got 1, 2, 3, 2, and then 1. So it's a little pyramid of shimmer shades, and each of those shades works well with the color story that it's with. As far as the color selection, overall, I think it's very, very pretty. I would say, however, that we have a little bit too many of the mid-toned mattes within the pink family and within the purple family. Like this shade and this shade and this shade are all quite close. Yes, they are incrementally darker, but maybe we could have skipped out on this one and put something else in there. And then these 3 purples, yes, they're all different. This one's a little more blue-based, this one's a little more pink-based, but they're still, all 3 of them, mid-range purple mattes. And so maybe we could have cut out one of them and done something else. And when I say something else, I'm thinking this palette really would have benefited from a much more blue purple. Like this one's sort of periwinkle with a blue base, something like that, although perhaps a slightly deeper shade of it. And I think also a red matte would have been a good addition because we've got a dark red matte and we've got a red shimmer, and so maybe a light toned or medium toned red matte would have been a nice addition. I think that would have made the palette a little bit more interesting and possibly appeal to a few more people because this entire diagonal row is a little redundant, and then these 2 here are a bit redundant. I don't know. This one right here, this one is basically my skin tone, only slightly lighter, so I'm gonna use it to blend something out, but that one's gonna go pretty well untouched for me. As far as the formula goes, the shimmers are beautiful, as Beauty Bay shimmers always are. They are smooth, they are buttery, they are pigmented, they are beautiful. If you have creasing, I very much recommend the Glam Light Icing Primer because I have been using that for any shadows that crease on me, and Beauty Bay especially for me is the litmus test for creasing because their mattes and shimmers crease on my eyes. But the Glam Light Icing Primer has helped with that tremendously. And as far as the mattes go, all of the lighter mattes worked really, really well for me. The darker mattes, Mahogany, Ruby, and Glove specifically. I didn't have as many problems with Ruby, but I changed my technique. But Glove specifically, probably Ruby, and I did put Mahogany here, but I didn't get enough of a chance to see how it performed. Generally, the dark Beauty Bay mattes don't build terribly well. So my recommendation is to start with the darker, like I did today. Start with the darkest shadow and then work your way lighter and lighter and lighter as you go. And I think it ends up looking about the same if you go the reverse order. That's just my experience. That is what I was expecting going into this palette. A lot of people reviewed the palette and said that they really didn't like that, like those deepening shades, which are so important if you want a more dramatic look. They didn't perform well, and I would say that that's probably because they were being placed on top of other shadows. In look number 1, I did a lighter matte on my whole crease, and then the lid itself, the bottom part of the lid didn't have any shadow, and the top part of the lid did. So when I placed down the shade Glove, it applied very nicely to the bottom part where there was no other shadow, but then it started getting patchy up higher. If you go into the palette with that understanding and the expectation that you have to work in reverse order, it's not a problem. I think today's look turned out very pretty, and I don't have any complaints about the formula, nothing that would make me disappointed in my purchase or frustrated with the palette or anything like that. Overall, I think it's very, very pretty. It is what I was expecting as far as formula and performance go. It fits in nicely with my collection of Beauty Bay. I think it's gonna be a great companion palette for the age of opulence, and yeah, I think it's really nice. So I thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoyed the looks. You have to let me know in the comments below if you try them yourself, if you got the palette and what you think of it. Remember that you can find me on Instagram at shimmers&silver, and please like and subscribe to this channel if you want to see more content like this. And until we see each other again, I do hope you have a really great day. Bye!